Welcome, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you who've joined us today from wherever you are. Well, my name is Lyman Goodrich, and I'm the producer here of Bifocal. So welcome to Bifocal, Clarifying Business Intelligence. So we want to thank you for taking some time out of your busy days to join us here today for a little fun and information. On today's episode of Bifocal, we'll be discussing the Supermodel Show, SSAS, PowerPivot, and Power BI in 2016. So I'd like to get things started, and please welcome your hosts for Bifocal. And let's see, we get them starting their webcams. Here we go, should be good.
Getting ready for my close-up, John, that's all.
I know, you're building the anticipation.
Hi, John.
How you doing, man?
I am doing excellent. It is evening time here in the lovely United Kingdom, and I am coming to you live and in living color, although my friend behind me is in black and white, from the Rackspace UK offices. Came back to the office just to spend some time with you and our special guest for this evening, and our audience this evening to talk about the Supermodel Show. We're having way too much fun with these names, John.
We'll run out of cute ones. We'll run out of cute ones pretty soon, I imagine.
Yeah, Friends never did. I'm enjoying the select star from mentality that we've got for going for this. It talks to the SQL geek in all of us. I'm over here. It's been an amazing time. I've been here now for 10 days, and happily, sadly, exuberantly, I get to go home tomorrow to my wonderful family and the surprisingly rainy weather in Texas. It has been amazingly beautiful here in London and up in Edinburgh the entire time I've been here in the UK. And I go back to Texas where it's rainy as all hell. So
that's odd. Well, they haven't thrown you out yet, so that's a good thing.
They've tried 3 times, but it hasn't happened.
Outstanding. Oh, we have a few things to get through today. As usual, we've got no shortage of news over the last month. A couple things have happened. I think I saw you not too long ago.
Yes, I remember. Didn't I see you this morning on Skype where we were playing with something? Or was that yesterday? All the days are blending together for me because we've got so much going on these days.
No kidding. Well, should we run through the list?
I think it's worth it. I think I'm going to take the first one.
You hit it, man.
We've been waiting in breathless anticipation. We've seen so many release candidates and so many community tech previews, and finally, SQL Server 2016 will be here on June the 1st. And I am excited. John's excited. Hopefully, all of you out there are as well. From a SharePoint perspective, it's nice. For the first time in a while, SharePoint GA'd first before SQL. That hasn't happened in a while. It's usually the other way around. So SQL Server 2016 is launching on June the 1st. It'll be available for download at that point. The platform has been extremely solid. I've been playing with it for a very long time, as you have, John. I think CTP 3.2 is still my favorite. It's the one that gave us all the really good stuff that we care about with Power BI and reporting services and all that really cool stuff. And there's even more great stuff that is still yet to be talked about, and our special guest for the day is here to talk to some of those things as well.
Absolutely.
You want to take the next one?
Well, and I'll just fill in a little bit. Yeah, I will. I'll fill in just a tad. It's also very important in that BI and SharePoint 2016, unlike previous versions, pretty much needs SQL Server 2016. And not to put too fine a point upon it, there's a confusion out there. It's, we can't go to SQL. We have our SharePoint running on a server that other systems rely on. We can't update that. But no, we can take the pieces we need from 2016, put them either on a separate server, or we can use the SharePoint service applicant from them. So I just wanted to get that out of the way.
Yeah, I've been shouting it from the rooftops for the past couple of versions. Yeah. As a BI guy, I don't care where your content databases are. As long as they're on a supported version, it doesn't really matter. Give me what I need in order to do the BI functionality that we have to have, and I'm happy. That's the thing that we really need. It's not about everything has to be on one version of SQL Server. That's not the case. content databases, config databases. Let them live on whatever you need them to live on. Give us the right stuff from a BI perspective.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And there's a couple of, there's the new stuff in SSRS that's quite frankly quite exciting here. But one of the biggest pieces of news that wasn't public until the launch announcement was made just a couple weeks ago was the fact that standard mode SQL Server will now support the embedded tabular model, and I think that that's just outstanding. And I imagine our guest today is going to have a few things to say about that. But the requirement to have BI edition, which is gone now, or Enterprise edition in SQL Server was keeping an awful lot of people from using the tabular model. So that should stop as well. So yeah, that's a big plus from where I'm standing.
Yeah, license confusion has long been a problem for SQL Server. Reducing the number of SKUs is definitely helpful for our customers, for the community. It makes life easier. The BI edition was very useful. It allowed you to get started faster because it was Server plus Core. Now being able to use standard edition just makes life so much simpler. Power BI storage, and John, you told me about this when I hadn't had an opportunity to read this yet. It's been a limiting factor, only having 250 meg out there of space to be able to upload. Now the storage is increased to one gig per model. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's right. Up until now, and just to articulate, I'm just trying to post in the URL into the chat window here, and I'm not having any success, which is odd.
That's okay. I'll take care of it while you talk, John. Go ahead.
Yeah, up until now, although free users would have 1 gigabyte total storage in the Power BI service, and pro users could have 10 gigabytes of storage, your individual model, each model could not exceed 250 megabytes, which is a fairly large model for an awful lot of scenarios. But I know that we've bumped into many a case where that wasn't sufficient, and we had to go back to a back-end SSAS server for just that purpose. So the increase to a 1 gigabyte data model is gonna do us well. So that was really, really good news. And frankly, I'd expected. I had no idea that one was coming. I was under the impression we'd be sitting at 250 megabytes for quite a long time. As well, let's jump on to the next one as well. Yeah, in addition with that, about the same time, the latest service update gave us the ability to use the Q&A capability with on-premises models. So if you do have an enterprise gateway, you can take advantage of the Q&A features in Power BI. And if you're unfamiliar with those, that's the ability to ask English language questions of your data. Show me the sales figures for last year or something like that. And it even ties in, if you've got all of the requisite pieces, it ties in with Cortana on the Windows front end, so you can literally speak questions about your data. Pretty exciting.
That is very cool. The next one, I was on an IT Unity web show with this gentleman just the other night. Mark Anderson, really brilliant guy, has been seeing a lot of what's coming down the pike for a while, and I agree with you, John. It is a little bit hard to be able to copy and paste. I'm going to copy and paste this one into my notepad, and then I'll paste it into the chat window here. Mark found,
I'll get this one.
Oh, I got it already. I'm already there. Mark has found the beauty that is Power BI and wrote a really nice article about getting up and running with Power BI and SharePoint lists from the developer perspective. Not going through Power BI desktop or anything like that, but going through it from a developer perspective. Really good article, as all of Mark's are well thought out and well said. I even followed it as a non-dev, so it was worth checking out. So that's in the chat window as well.
One of the things he ran into was the fact that the SharePoint source and OData itself, you can use either one when you go at the list data with Power BI, does not support multi-value fields. So if you've got a SharePoint list with multi-value fields, you're out of luck, and the problem is it blocks everything. So Mark's article explains how to query out the offending fields so you can still get everything else if you need to. So that's pretty useful. Mm-hmm. And another nice, useful thing that came in, again, on the gateway front this month with the service, is the ability to do UPN mapping. Woohoo! Excited?
Well, I am, but then again, I'm a giant server dork, so that's that's neither here nor there.
Just to explain it, if you're using an enterprise gateway, with the Power BI service and you're using a back-end SSAS server, your identity gets passed from the cloud back to that SSAS server in the back end. And that's fantastic because we can apply row-level security. The back-end server is going to know who I am. I'm not forced to use a proxy identity like with most data sources. The downside of that, however, is if I'm using an identity that's different than what is registered on the back end, that wouldn't work before. So if my domain name didn't match up with what the domain name is registered on the inside, that wasn't going to work. It didn't know who I was. So UPN mapping allows me in the service to say, this domain, unlimitedviz.com, is the same thing as saying UVI or /UVI from an NT authentication standpoint. So that was something.
It translates user principal name for us, and is allowing that translation to happen on the backside to be able to find the identity with whatever it is, being able to pass that back. Because the UPN is what's actually getting published out into Office 365 and into Azure AD and the Power BI service as well.
A thing or two about AD out there. I've heard of it.
Yeah, just a couple. Again, giant server dork. That's what I enjoy. You and I were both privileged and lucky and sober enough to attend the Future of SharePoint event very early in the morning in San Francisco. It was a delightful, wonderful experience to be out there and to be there live and in person. We kind of geeked out just a little too much. Check out some of the articles that both John and I published about tracking Twitter data and whatnot through streaming analytics and using Power BI bygones. But the Power BI icon is now showing up in Office 365. It's been there for a little bit for me. The
big thing for me was when they were showing off all of the new client-side web parts up on stage. And you can insert this and you can insert, there's the content query web part. Oh, what's that little Power BI icon there? They didn't really talk about it very much, but it doesn't, you don't have to think too hard to wonder where that's going. I can embed a Power BI report in SharePoint. They didn't say it, but the icon was there. I think I could conclude that.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable thing. And we've done a little bit. We had on our last show, we talked a little bit about the difficulty being able to do it and showed people how you actually can do it through code. Ted was kind enough to come on and do that for us. It's nice that it looks like they're going to do that out of the gates and make it a web part that you can just add very easily. So, and last but not least, you want to hit on the last one?
Well, it's just one I found out this morning, just this morning with yet another update to the Power BI service. This is why it's so exciting. I don't know if you're familiar with the drill down feature, but if you create a visual I know you are. If you create a visual in the service, you can pile dimensions on top of dimensions in a visual and drill down on them. And there was a little icon in the upper right-hand corner of each visual to talk about how you wanted it to behave, because you can click on a data point in Power BI and cross-filter everything on the page. But if you wanted to drill down, how do you do that? Well, you'd click on the drill down icon, then you'd click on the data point, and then it would open up down at the next level of dimension. And that wasn't necessarily all that intuitive for users. So they've had, they recently added an explore menu to the top to allow you to drill into the source data. You can view the underlying data for any of the visuals. And they've moved the drill functionality up into that menu item, so you won't see it. So where did it go? It's gone. They removed the feature. No, they didn't. They've just moved the cheese up into the upper part of the menu. So now you basically go into drill down mode and everything behaves from a drill down standpoint.
It actually spells it out for you as well, right? It actually says the whole thing. I think that's been around for about 2 weeks now, because I think you and I played with that a little bit. I wondered where it went. Yeah, it was there in that menu. So very cool stuff.
Yeah,
So
Adam Saxon tweeted about it this morning, which made me go look and say, oh, that's where they put it. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've yammered on for long enough. That's the only time I'll say yammer on this podcast. And I said it twice. Now I feel dirty.
There you go.
Would you like to introduce our guest, John?
Yeah. Well, we're very privileged to have today, and I'm gonna try not to butcher his name. Kasper de Jonge. So you can tell me how badly I did or well I did. I don't know if Lyman or Kasper can there you go. And I'm going to, and I know Kasper as the data model guy. I don't know what your official title at Microsoft is. So Kasper is in Bellevue today, but you works at Microsoft in Redmond. So if you wouldn't mind, just let us know your background a little bit.
Sure, thank you, and thanks for inviting me. So my name is Kasper de Jonge, and I'm a senior program manager, and I've done lots of different things across the Microsoft BI team. I think, well, before I joined Microsoft, I was also a data modeling guy, a consultant doing BI stuff. Then I started working at Microsoft about 5.5 years ago, working on PowerPivot for Excel. That was really the big thing that I've worked on in SQL Server 2012. And then I started working on analysis services, really the Tabular model, the first iteration of it. And since then, I've worked on a bunch of different things. PowerPivot integration into Excel 2013, the native integration. I've worked on that, the measuring, the measure editing experience, and all of those kinds of things. And then, of course, Power BI started coming up. So I've actually done a bunch of things there. I've worked on the developer APIs. I've worked on Power BI Desktop. But the recent, I would probably say the recent year, I've actually worked on analysis services for SQL Server 2016. So helping ship that in SQL Server 2016 and including like the standard edition changes for Tabular and a bunch of those things there. That's mostly what I've been focusing on up until now, the last year.
Fantastic. You've been around the horn a little bit and seen a few things.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. I mean, because we're all one big team, you can kind of shift around a bit and see it from all angles and all sides, which is really cool.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a bunch of questions to ask you today. I guess I'll start off with one that I get asked frequently. I get asked a bunch of these frequently, so I want to hear why you have to answer them so I can cheat and steal your ideas. But one of the ones is what would you explain, I guess, is the need for having a tabular model when we already had cubes? We had OLAP, MOLAP, ROLAP, however you want to put it.
Right.
But
Yeah.
the traditional analysis services models versus these new ones, what does it bring to the table? And frankly, what does it still not have? Where does either one shine, I guess, in the
Sure. Yeah, that's a question we get asked a lot as well, of course. But I think the biggest differentiator between the two is of course, with the whole coming of Power BI and the self-service BI world, it's no longer a matter of IT just goes off and builds a model in isolation. And that's right now, the big thing is we need to be able to have a grow-up story. Someone starts in Power BI Desktop or in PowerPivot for Excel, starts building a model for himself, and then one of the big things that they see, and especially what we have today inside of the SharePoint add-ins for Power BI as well, is like the governance piece. Like self-service BI is a boss comes into your office and asks you, hey, I need to get this data now. Well, if you can only get this data through a big analysis service model, you have to go to IT and ask them, give me the data and all of those things, and it will take several weeks to actually get that data. So we wanted to give more people the ability to get to this data. And that's why we launched PowerPivot in the first place. What we actually see a lot is it's no longer more of an isolated process where IT guys just go in and go off in their island and build this model and then self-service BI happens on this place. No, it's more a collaboration of the two, where someone goes in and builds a PowerPivot for Excel model or a Power BI Desktop model, and there are some holes here which we're going to work on, but I need to grow up. I am working on this model and everyone loves it, and I can see through my SharePoint governance features that is being used a lot, but the analysts get swarmed with questions because the model is so popular. She doesn't get the ability to do her own work. So you need to be able to grow up this story to an enterprise model. And this is where you can actually go in and say, okay, I want to take this PowerPivot file and make it an enterprise model that I can manage in Visual Studio. I can check in, I can check out, I can take it over. And the only way you can actually really do that is by having the same engine in both places. And that's what we have. The same thing that you have inside of Excel, it's the same engine that we're running inside of Power BI. It's the same engine we're running in Power BI Desktop, and it's the same engine we're running inside of Analysis Services on-prem. So, and that is not something that is possible with multidimensional, because it's really different, and it's a really different setup. It's super powerful, but in order for you to understand how you should build it, you have to go to a week-long course and understand attribute relationships and hierarchies and the whole shebang. I love those things, and I went to that week-long course. So I did all these things, and all the better came out all the better. But it prohibits me from growing up, and it prohibits us from getting more people into the platform. Like, it's super simple now. I've seen it a lot even internally at Microsoft, where you see a finance guy who just used to do Excel now actually maintains an enterprise model because he grew into that role and he grew into that story, and now he's a BI guy. Well, and the only reason that that's possible because he had this grow up story.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the biggest reason why there's a difference between the two. Multidimensional models are still being used a lot, and there's a lot of organizations who have built their IT infrastructure, their analytical infrastructure on top of multidimensional models. And yeah, they can still definitely go do that. And because there are some, as we mentioned earlier, there are some limitations to the tabular model right now, things that are not available yet into the tabular model. And it's mostly around more complex, complicated models, because the tabular model really started as a modeling environment for Excel, for the simpler scenarios, and not as much the hard scenarios, the things you can solve with the multidimensional model easily, things like parent-child relationships, ragged hierarchies. All these things are built into the multidimensional model because they're designed for solving the hard enterprise problems. The tabular model doesn't have those yet, but that's something that we are actively going to work on soon.
It's certainly where all the investment's happening, right?
Yeah, it's definitely where a lot of the investment is happening. And again, it has to do with when you add something to Power BI, a modeling feature, it automatically gets added to the Analysis Services tabular model. So even though the Analysis Services team on its own didn't necessarily, like even in this release, a lot of the features that we shipped in SQL Server 2016 Analysis Services were actually built as part of PowerPivot for Excel at one point. For example, like bidirectional cross-filtering, and some of those features were actually designed earlier on for PowerPivot experience. So we didn't actually create them for Analysis Services. So you see a lot of the investments are happening in Power BI, and they automatically accrue to the on-prem story as well, the Analysis Services story.
Well, one thing I don't know that everybody's clear on is Power BI really is a nice, pretty front end to Analysis Services, right? I mean, that is a great big Analysis Services instance in behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think we're actually, I've said this several times before earlier, but I think we are actually hosting the largest Analysis Services farm in the world with Power BI, because that's what we're doing. And it's all running on top of Power BI, all running on top of Analysis Services. And there are so many machines, the farm is big, huge. And the other great thing is, actually, this is the first SQL Server 2016 release where we've been running the same engine in production for months, because we also run the same engine inside of Power BI. And we've been doing it for months. And same thing, Power BI Desktop is actually already using the new compatibility level that we introduced in SQL Server 2016. They've been running it for months inside of Power BI Desktop. So we really have seen a lot of, I've seen a lot of the real world usage happening already from within this, and that's great. That's good.
Fantastic. Jace?
Well, kind of had a question for you, Kasper. I wasn't sure if it's okay to ask. I think I'm going to skip it, though. One of those little being the IT pro curiosities I wanted to ask about, about where all this stuff might live. I have to agree with you, though. You guys definitely, I've run some massive Analysis Services farms in the past, and that stuff is not easy and it's not cheap. And one of the questions that I get asked on a regular basis is this something, especially on the Power BI side, is that going to be something that's going to come on-prem? And, the answer, I usually give is, do you really want to have to host all of those cores and all of that RAM and all of that coming back on-prem in order to do all of that? We get a lot of the visualization. You take a look at the reporting in 2016 from a SQL Server perspective. There's a lot there. Don't want to ask controversial questions, but it's something that I get asked on a regular basis about the futures as you guys are trying to take a look at it. Do you see people? I know that now that it's in the standard edition, I guess part of my question for you is, what was the driver for making that, taking it from being the BI edition where very specifically you're saying you may not want this for everybody, because all too often we end up with customers who go and turn everything on. They want to spin up everything that they possibly can. It eats a bunch of memory. And part of the reason why SQL has gotten such the rap it has is because everybody just turned everything on, and you consume all the memory, and you do all these bad things because nobody's managing the SQL Server. What was one of the drivers for you guys in wanting to push this functionality, which I know John and I are big fans. I wrote a book on on some of this stuff. John's been doing this for a long time as well. What was the driver for pushing that back into standard edition and making it more accessible? Is this, we've had analysis services as a part of the cube model, the multidimensional model. Why now?
Well, I think the biggest thing here is today a lot of customers and even a lot of ISVs, they start and they say, okay, I want to do analysis services, and then they got to look at the question. So okay, what do I choose? And they choose, maybe I'll do what's the cheapest.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that's multidimensional because that's in standard, and not the easier to get started flavor is just an enterprise. So, and we saw that and I think John alluded to that earlier as well, that was a big blocker for the use of Tabular, because you have to pay, I don't know how much it is, but it's like, it's a lot, yes. It's a lot more to just be able to do things easier. And a lot of the IT guys say, well, I'm not afraid of a little bit more hard work. So let's just continue with multidimensional. Then they're missing.
I'm afraid of the IT guys.
Yeah. They're not afraid of a little bit more work or to go to a training course of a week. But we really saw that as an adoption blocker for Tabular. And that's the biggest reason that we put it in standard, because we also want to have this grow up story from Power BI being able to, and I think you talked about that a little bit as well, the grow up story from Power BI to analysis services as well to start happening. So that's something that we're going to focus on post SQL Server 2016, is also the ability to, just like what you can do today with PowerPivot files. You can take a PowerPivot file and import it into analysis service and it just works. Today, that does not work for Power BI desktop files. We need to be able to do that. So you can take a Power BI desktop file and load it into analysis service and it just works. The same thing goes for RS. You can go take a Power BI desktop file and upload it to an RS server, and you'll be able to visualize the Power BI desktop file directly into the browser in SSRS. There's actually, I don't know if you guys seen it, but there's a blog post out there already today that talks about this on the SSRS team blog.
Yeah.
What the future is for and how are we going to integrate those things. There are some really interesting questions, of course, as well, because Power BI desktop ships every month. So what happens when you're going to ask your customers to upgrade their production environment every month to be able to support these new changes? I think you guys also know that's probably not going to happen. So we need to come up with a way to actually get that to work seamlessly.
It's hard enough to get customers' environments to patch on things that have vulnerabilities, let alone everything's working fine. You just want the features where you can wait. So
yeah, exactly. So we need to come up with a way, and we haven't come up with one right now, but we need to come up with a way so we can actually get this to happen. Gotcha. So you can pick a Power BI desktop version or something like that and say, okay, I'm going to upload it to analysis services and it will just work.
But it does answer that. It does answer that question, right? Everybody is. When are we going to get Power BI on-prem? When are we going to get Power BI on-prem? That's it.
It's.
Sort of.
Yeah, sort of. And that's kind of like, I do not know exactly where it's going to end up. We do know for sure you're going to be able to do the most important things, pick up Power BI desktop files with all the reports that are into it and upload it to RS, and you'll be able to use it in there. But the other questions is like Q&A, dashboards themselves, what are they going to look like and how they're going to be merged into the whole experience. That's TBD.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I've got one that it's a bit of a bugaboo of mine. It's terminology. So the way we refer to these things, we've got my company. We've got people, old school, new school. Everything's a cube, and I like to try to be precise when I name things. So I call them data models. I'm not sure I'm even right about that, but I'm going with it. So I'm referring to the tabular models as data models. I'm referring to OLAP, MOLAP as cubes, but I get tripped up too, or when I'm explaining to people, when you're installing the model, you see multidimensional or data mining mode versus tabular mode. Well, when you think about it, tabular is multidimensional too. I can do multidimensional analysis, and it really, it doesn't matter what the back end is. So I think it's a bit of a misnomer. I just love to hear your thoughts on that stuff.
I think in general we try to call them the BS semantic model,
Okay.
and that's the way. we want to talk about this.
This guy over here tried to tell me that we don't use that term anymore. On
I understand why we did it was that, because initially when the tabular model came out in SQL Server 2012, we called them the BS semantic model.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So back then it was just, but then we kind of quickly realized that that's going to be causing more confusion than do good. So then we said, okay, the way we want to think about these things are the BS semantic model. They're both the semantic model, and they are the way you implement them chooses how you want to call it internally. So you can create a tabular model, but it's still a semantic model because you can still look at them from a cube view. When you connect from Excel to it, you will still see the multidimensional view of the world. But when you connect from tabular to it, you will also see when you connect to Power BI Desktop, you will see the tabular view of the models. And actually goes for both ways. Both from multidimensional models, when you connect to tabular, you will see a different view than when you do from Excel. So that's why we want to call, there's one semantic model for all client tools can connect to it, and it doesn't matter how you build it and how you choose to do it. And I'm not sure if you actually have seen this yet, but one of the other SKU changes that were made in this release is that we also put a DAX support for multidimensional models in standard edition.
Yeah. Oh, that's in standard.
Yep.
Okay, I didn't know about that one. That's fantastic. Well, that makes sense too. It makes sense.
Yes.
And there's still some things that are going to require enterprise edition. PowerPivot for SharePoint for one, which I would read into. Yeah, maybe we don't want to use PowerPivot for SharePoint anymore.
I think in general, the customers who have SharePoint are already customers who also have enterprise edition.
Yeah, that's
and also we need to upsell at one point.
I just want to round back. What I heard from Kasper is Jason was right, John was wrong. I'm just
no. What Kasper said is the layer is called the semantic model. I was talking about the underlying items. So there we go.
Just saying, So
you live to fight another day.
Yes, it's very, Kasper, I get very, very few and very rare wins with John. He's always first to everything. He always knows tons more. He's handsomer, has more hair. So I have to declare victory wherever I can.
But it's great.
Likes him better. It's just, it is what it is. But bygones. So I have a question. Being as we said, I'm the giant server dork in the room, Active Directory, etc. John and I are both SharePoint guys. When do you think we might see claims-based authentication coming into analysis services? Is there a future there? Now that claims is, for SharePoint and for a lot of what we're doing, a requirement is the thing. Do we see that coming to the SQL Server stack, to the analysis services specifically?
It's definitely pretty high up on the list to go do. But it's not just claims, it's just different auth, let's put it that way. So I think we want to definitely go to a place where analysis can be connected to from more than just AD.
Wonderful.
Yeah, well, we know it works in Power BI, right?
Yeah, but there's a lot you can do when you own the engine. Like this, there's some interesting things that the engine team has done.
Oh yeah,
possible. Yeah.
Well, I just what I noticed was I think I wrote about this with that Analyze in Excel feature, that new Analyze in Excel feature in the new driver. If you pull that apart, you see claims auth in there.
Yeah, it's not really claims auth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, there's some layers in the service that actually take care of a lot of these things, and they connect to it differently. The analysis service engine still does not support claims auth directly.
Oh, okay. The current. Oh, that's good to know. That's interesting.
But it's definitely pretty high up on the list. I think for the next release, one of the bigger things is of course more for Tabular is like as you mentioned earlier. Today, the Temporal Model is really focused on, and it's really built and designed for using it as by an analyst, because it came from PowerPivot originally, and then it came from Power BI Desktop. But we haven't really had the chance to really go back and say, okay, what are some of the enterprise capabilities that we need for the analysis services Tabular model? Things like claims, but also if you have like 200 measures, it's pretty hard to actually maintain and control 200 measures right now in the Tabular model. So that's definitely some areas we are going to invest in. And also like scaling up bigger hardware, things like that, we're definitely going to go and invest in heavily in Tabular for going forward.
Performance.
So, yeah, it kind of all goes together, like enterprise-y things.
That'll be music to your ears, Jace.
Oh, absolutely. So, John, you want to pick the next one off the list?
Yeah, sure. One of the other things that I was always beating the drum about for the last few years, again, being SharePoint guys, right, coming from that world, is PowerPivot for SharePoint and how that all works, how it all hangs together. I mean, the first release, it was, well, when you dig, you see analysis services under the covers. The first one, that had to be installed on a SharePoint server. In the 2013 timeframe, we got the ability to install it on a separate server, but it wasn't exactly obvious as to how that was done. I mean, you really had to know what you were doing to figure it out. And now we see it coming up front and center. Now we see it as one of the modes. We got multidimensional mode, we've got tabular mode, and we have what's now called PowerPivot mode that I used to know as SharePoint mode. And I just wondered if you wanted to talk about, and you by default it has to be installed separately. It doesn't just install when you install the add-in. In fact, the add-in is something you download and install separately. I just wondered if you wanted to go over some of the thinking behind those changes.
I think one of the things was one of the feedback that we got is because that it wasn't clear of how to actually get this installed and where to find it. And so we moved it up into the place where you actually make a choice of how it actually runs. That's mostly the biggest change that we've done there. Of course, there's a lot of infrastructural change because SharePoint has changed a lot. But other than that, the infrastructure is pretty much the same as what it used to be. Yeah. I think the biggest thing, the reason why we changed it and why we changed that radio button to a different position is because it wasn't clear. As you mentioned earlier as well, there was feedback on, hey, it's not clear how this actually is going to work and where do I need to do it and why do I need to pick it in this spot and then change something else over here? It was kind of awkward.
Yeah, I was quite happy to see it myself. I think it makes a ton of sense, but yeah, I get, and it's a lot of people who would install this didn't even know what was happening. So yeah, and then now at least it makes that choice very clear, and you can make intelligent architectural decisions with it. Let's see what we got another couple of good ones. Oh yeah, this is kind of interesting. We've got up until I guess about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, our only real option for providing row-level security into back-end data was through analysis services and through the gateway, through the enterprise gateway, which is, I guess, was the SSAS connector before that, and then the enterprise gateway now. But now we've got this new row-level security feature in Power BI, and it works with any data source. I'm not 100% clear on exactly what all of the differences are between the way row-level security is implemented there and whereas it's implemented in analysis service. I understand, of course, they're two fully different things, but I'd love to hear what you had to say.
They're actually exactly the same thing.
Are they?
The same feature showing up in two different places. Yeah, it's just it has a slightly different UI, but under the covers it's using exactly the same analysis services methodology and roles and security that are available today. Yeah, so it's exactly the same. Of course, there are, the UI doesn't allow you to do everything that you can do with the analysis tabular models, but I think, some of these things will probably start showing up over time as well.
That's great.
Yeah, it's mostly focused for the analysts to just be able to just create roles and security that can, and the tabular model, it's more free form, so you can do more, but that also makes it more complicated. Yeah, but in the end, it's the same feature.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Go ahead, Jess.
I guess part of the question, that I have, and then we'll get to Teresa's question here in the chat window, Kasper, so if you want to take a look. Part of my question is more of a political one, and not a Trump versus Hillary political one, but more of a Microsoft politics-y kind of a question. The teams that work on Power BI versus the team that works on analysis services in 2016, oftentimes, I'm a big Dilbert fan. I've always thought of some of the teams at Microsoft as there was an old cartoon about the battling business units, the BBUs, and the one you never wanted to piss off was the janitorial BBU, but everybody else you just sort of went at it with. It always felt like in olden times that we saw more conflict where one group wanted to do things one way and one group wanted to do things another. And you just pointed out that the feature is exactly the same. How are you all working very tightly together? Or are the teams intermingled? Is it the same team these days that are working on the Power BI service as the analysis services service?
It's pretty fluid, but the way, so we're all report to the same VP. Let's put it that way. That's the first thing. So that's not, it hasn't always been the same. So we all report to the same VP, and what we do have is we have a pretty complicated branching structure at Microsoft of where code lives. Mm-hmm. We have a single place where the analysis service engine lives, and multiple teams contribute to that same code. So Power BI Desktop team is more than happy to add a new DAX function. There are different engineers, but they're adding it in the same place. When we add a new feature, like for example, one of the big things that we added in SQL Server 2016, the analysis services box team, is allowing you to do connectivity in direct query for MDX client tools like Excel. Like before we even shipped the SQL Server 2016, the analyzing Excel feature that we were talking about earlier was actually leveraging this feature. So it's all the same teams. They're all contributing to the same code base, like an open code base. There of course are rules, and there are some architects who are keeping an eye out on what's going on and what's getting checked in. And there is some discussion, of course, about how things need to look. But in general, it's not it's an open system. So anyone can check in whatever they want. And if other teams don't like it, then the feature is just turned off for the other teams. Like for example, one of the big things is, and it's not like that we don't like the features, but some of the Power BI Desktop features that you actually ship today are also shipping in the SQL Server 2016 release, but they're not turned on yet. Because it's a point in time. And because we ship in a SQL Server release, we have to do more, how should I say it? I wouldn't say more testing, but it's more like there's a lot of checkbox that we have to check. Lots of different tests and checks that the Power BI team doesn't have to do or doesn't do. So
I can understand that, delivering something to the on-prem world where you won't have control over fixing it if there's something that you discover that you really have an issue with. I can understand that being a much more stringent set of requirements to validate before you actually move forward.
Yeah, because the Power BI Desktop team can say, okay, we shipped a pretty bad bug, here's an update. And yeah, for SQL Server 2016, that's not really an option. Although we of course have CUs, but still it's much more a painful process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Teresa, we were answering all of your questions in the chat here, but John, do you want to answer the?
Well, we'll jump in. I want to ask this one because it's a question. I extol the virtues of Power Query all the time. Power Query is wonderful. Power Query works in Excel. Power Query works in Power BI. But I'm going to host a workbook in PowerPivot for SharePoint, and you know, immediately I can't refresh that data model,
Yes.
or at least I haven't been able to. And I also can't refresh it as far as I'm aware of right now in SSAS, even with the release of 2016.
Yeah, that's correct.
Is that going to change sometime soon? I would love so badly to be able to say
we are going to support Power BI desktop files inside of an analysis service. This has to come as well.
Yeah, it does.
Several reasons. There are several interesting reasons that we don't support it today. The most important reason is, I don't know if you've ever looked at what the analysis services schema looks like when Power Query is involved, but the way that it's being stored inside of the script is not very developer friendly. You cannot make any changes. It's a base64 encoded string inside of the connection string, which
Yes, yeah.
makes it impossible for me to manage an SMS or use deployment wizard or go into SDT to make any changes. So before we can ship, we have to go figure that one out and fix that. And the second thing is the way that credentials work in Power Query are different than the way they do it in analysis services. So credentials in Power Query are actually stored outside of the model.
Yeah.
Where analysis services, you should be able to load an analysis service up into analysis services themselves and say, process, and have the credentials stored inside of the model. So we need to go do that as well. We need to give you the capability of saying, hey, you have this Power Query connection, and the Power Query connection has these credentials, and you should be able to have an automated process inside of an analysis service that says go process. So once we solve these things, and they're pretty high up on the list to go solve, then we will be able to support it.
Okay, and I assume it's the same thing holding up the refresh in the SharePoint.
I think the SharePoint one is probably a little bit different. I'm not quite sure what the status is there because in the same way as we do it in Power BI, there are ways to actually be able to refresh these things, but it's a little bit more complicated in the SharePoint environment. But I do know there are people working on it and thinking about it. So, yeah. I am the analysis services engine guy. We have someone else who's mostly looking at the SharePoint piece of analysis service.
Perfect. Perfect. That's gotten most of it. I don't know. Do you have anything further here, Jace?
I do. There are a one other things we had in our list. So now
we got some from Teresa too. So go ahead.
And we have the one I wanted to ask. You mentioned upsell in your comment earlier. Is there any difference between is there any limitation on the standard edition tabular model versus the enterprise edition tabular model? Size constraint.
There definitely are constraints about it. Like one of the biggest probably constraint that we have is there's no way for you to define partitions, for example.
Right.
And it's the same as multidimensional models. We've actually took the same restrictions as multidimensional models have and put them on Tabular as well. The only additional constraint that we have is there's also a size limitation on the instance you have. Because analysis services Tabular relates everything in memory, there's a 16 gig limit on the instance of analysis services Tabular.
Is that a per model limit or per instance?
Instance.
Okay.
And then this actually has some interesting things because the reason why it's per instance is because when you do processing of the analysis services model, you actually probably need double the amount of memory. Mm-hmm. Especially when you don't have any partitions to kind of scale it out. So in fact, you can probably have an 8 gig model compressed in standard if you ever want to process it again. So that,
yeah,
I think those things, the ability to define partitions and the memory limit. There are a few others like perspectives, I believe is not there, and translations, but there are a few enterprise-y features. And we'll probably, when we start adding more enterprise capabilities to the tabular model, you will probably only see them show up in enterprise. And but the real thing that we want is for people to get started.
Yep, that makes sense.
Make that easy.
No, that makes perfect sense. You're not making, it's just that same, we're talking about the difference, I guess, before between tabular and multidimensional, and how hard it is to get going on it. Well, it's kind of the same thing. You're not giving them a great big, in this case, cost barrier up front. You're letting them get into it easily. You're not front-end loading the spend. Yeah.
I think maybe one of the things we haven't touched, and maybe you guys have it in one of the questions, but one of the things that I want to touch upon as well is one of the big differences that we're going to have going forward is that we now have a dedicated tools team to actually improve upon and again make more enterprise ready our developer tools inside of Visual Studio. Because today, like initially when we got started, we took the PowerPivot UI and put it inside of Visual Studio and we shipped it. And there's lots of people who do not like the measure grid and things like that. And we haven't really had the chance to actually make updates to that. And even in this release, we didn't have a chance to go address this. But we're going to go ship, just like SDT, the SQL Server Data Tools guys, because we're now together. We're going to continue shipping every month. New updates.
Cool. And that's why that's broken out of the product. That's a separate download, and that can be updated monthly. Yeah,
yes,
that makes
just like SDT. So there's a single download for both the SQL Server Data Tools for SQL Server development and reporting services and all services and SSIS into the single product, and we're going to continue updating that every month. So we'll get improvements there, and we have a team dedicated to it. So we'll definitely see a lot of good things happening there.
In that vein,
just don't change the name again.
In that vein, let me ask the question, because one of my biggest pet peeves, I love everything about about Power BI. I love PowerPivot too, but about Power BI, I have one bugaboo though, and it's especially in an environment such as Rackspace where all of our computers are locked down very heavily. From a security perspective, it's an important thing. Every time Power BI desktop revs, I can't update in the client. I have to go download a new version, close the client, and actually go reinstall it, run an MSI, and be able to do that. As a part of the tooling, is that something that's on the roadmap, I hope? Or if you don't need to tell me if it is, let me just say I really hope that we get to the point where we follow the model that Office has, where there's a backstage to it, and it's, hey, here's an update, click, and it will go in line and be able to update the client natively without having to do a reinstall of the client, because every time I have to do that, I have to go find out what the admin password is. I have to go log in. I have to authenticate credentials. I have to now then download the package and elevate my permissions in order to install, as opposed to from on the client side, just being able to click a button, have it do the update, and be done.
I do not know the answer, but I know there are probably some people who are going to be looking into, like one of the things you mentioned earlier is the elevated privileges. Maybe we don't need the elevated privileges anymore.
Yeah.
So, there are other tools out there doing that as well. But again, going back to the organization, there are two different teams. The Power BI Desktop team is the one who's doing the Power BI Desktop, and the team we're doing the professional side of things are the one who are doing Visual Studio.
Yeah.
So they're two different things.
Completely understood.
Although, of course, as you can imagine, once we start integrating Power Query into Visual Studio, which is also needs to be part of what we need to go do, we'll again reuse.
Yeah. If you're walking past an office where they're Kanbaning out what the things are important on behalf of users everywhere, that's one that I can request. So
yeah.
I know we're starting to run short on time, and we have a couple of tips and tricks we want to make sure we get to before we're done. Last but not least, from my perspective, John, the last one on the list here, Kasper, first of all, thanks so much for doing this. This has been awesome. Hopefully we'll be able to get you back again. Hopefully we haven't pushed you away too much. We'll be able to get you back when there's more for you to want to talk about. We love getting people on from Microsoft and having these conversations. But what are you really excited about? Now that 2016 is out the door, and you guys are a year past even thinking about it. It's been in the can for a while. what's got you excited, and without having to go into too many details, you can be abstract about it, but what gets you up in the morning that you look at, I don't even need coffee, I'm that excited about getting up and going in and working.
Well, I think there are two things. I think there's definitely the being able to improve the enterprisiness of analysis services, and the other big thing is this whole grow up story of Power BI, because Power BI gets so much traction right now, and we should be able to leverage that better, much better than what we do today. About, hey, we have this, and you guys probably see this as well. Like, people are doing Power BI desktop files, and we need some governance, some oversight on top of it, and saying, hey, we need to have this model grow up to be an enterprise-like model. We want to make that seamless. We want to make that easy to go do, and that is probably one of the coolest things and one of the best things that we can start doing. That's awesome. Yeah.
And I got to thank you for adding a new term to my lexicon, the grow up story. It's a good way to describe it. Yeah.
We're definitely going to have to use that when we do some of our fun pre-cons that we have coming up, John. We'll get shameless self-promotion in a few minutes. Kasper, thank you so much. Feel free to put in. John, you put a couple of tips and tricks in here.
Just a couple of light ones. Just a couple of light ones today. Because when we have someone on, we always do tend to go over, and I think we're running right up against our time. So we were talking a lot about the row level security feature in Power BI. One of the things you can do is dynamically render who you are. You can use the DAX has a username function, so you can include that now in your models if you've got row level security, if you can leverage that stuff. The thing is, it doesn't always work. You need to have turned on row level security, and that's an option on a per model basis in order to be able to get that username function to work. So if you need to use the name of the currently logged in user in your DAX function, you're going to have to make sure row level security is turned on. That's one of them. So that's a tip. And another one, I'll let you take that one, because this is one we ran into the other night when we were bombing through your evaluation.
Yes. So you can't rename a Power BI a field in Power BI visuals. John and I are both of the ilk of, we like to capitalize the first letter of any row, and that you can't do it. You can go in and rename it. You have to rename it something else, and then you can go back and fix it. But you can create calculated measures and calculated columns. And you can do that there. So because you can't, I was running into a problem where I really hated the fact that it was showing, when I would go in, I would take my column and I would do a calculation. I was averaging a column, and what happened was it would say average of and then the column name every time, and it was really irritating the heck out of me. So in talking with John, we were just trying to, we bounce these things off each other all the time. Like, I just can't get past that. And he said, why don't you just create a calculated measure and be done with it? That way you can name it any dang thing you want. You can name it something short. So my legend looked a lot nicer at that point. The other one that we ran into, which was a little bit fun, was as we were going along, I was trying to do an average of 5 columns, excuse me, because rows were not a problem. But I was trying to average the 5 columns, but I had some nulls in there, and that ran into a little bit of an issue there. So I was able to go in and create a calculated column that allowed me to sum up the number of columns that had a value greater than 1, so anything that didn't have null. And then I was able to go in and I tried creating a calculated column to be able to do the calculation of, all right, that divided by that equals that, because I did a sum of all of them, regardless of whether there was a null or not. So I had a sum column and I had a number of results column. And I was trying to do
count.
Yes. So what I ran into was actually I wasn't able to do the division of 2 calculated columns. It gave me a circular logic error, but I was able to go back in and turn one of them into a measure, and all of a sudden things worked. So I turned both of them into measures, and now I was able to do the same thing. Because it wasn't using calculated columns, it was doing a calculated measure, and that circular error went away. So if you run into something like that, make sure that you test the logic and try doing calculated measures instead of calculated columns in that situation, and it worked out very nicely. So
I think that's actually good advice in general. Measures first.
I thought you might have something to add about that.
So now that we're bumping up against the bottom of the top of the hour, it is now 9 o'clock here in the UK. I know it's probably 1 o'clock or so there in Seattle, and you're probably ready to move on to another meeting. Kasper, thank you so much for joining us. A little bit of self-promotion. John, you and I are both together coming up in the end of June, I believe, at SP TechCon. We're doing a pre-con, and we each have some sessions. In August, we're coming back together again. We're going to be up your way, Kasper. Hopefully we can grab a cup of coffee or a soda, and we're going to be speaking at SharePoint Fest. Yes, I'm a Scotch guy. I think you found that out about me when we started talking on Twitter. So I'm happy to bring a bottle with me for that, or we can find one out in Seattle, either way. But we'll be out there for SharePoint Fest as well, and that's sometime in August, and then middle of, and then I imagine we'll be back together at some point, hopefully doing some fun stuff around Ignite as well. I don't know about that yet, but we've made a pitch. We're hoping something around the fun stuff we did.
Who knows?
Yeah. So with that, I know our next bifocal show is going to be next month as a part of the Unity Connect event. And I think Lyman, as we close out, is probably going to tell us a little bit more about that. So with that, thank you, folks. John, great talking to you as always. Kasper, awesome time. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks so much, Kasper.
Sure, you're welcome.
Thank you guys for joining us today. Let everybody know that who's joined us that today's presentation has been recorded, and you'll be able to come back to itunity.com/bifocal and view the recorded presentation later today. Also, as Jason had said, the next bifocal will be offered in coordination with Unity Connect Online unityconnect.com/online. You can register for that. There'll be 50 plus sessions covering SharePoint, Office 365, Azure, the whole business intelligence, the whole community. We look forward to seeing you there. We'll see you back next time, next bifocal as part of Unity Connect on June 23rd. Hope y'all have a great day, and thanks again for joining us today. Bye-bye.